Hello again, everyone, and welcome to our combined Sunday school classes, the Agape class and the Young Men's Bible class, two of our larger Sunday school classes here at First Presbyterian Church on North Elm Street near Fisher Park in downtown Greensboro. I'm Lane Ridenhour, and I thank you for joining us again as we gather online for worship and study on this, the sixth Sunday after Pentecost, Sunday, July 4th. Our Sunday school teacher, Sandie Gravett, is continuing her video series, What 2020 Has Taught Us About Being a 21st Century Church. This series is exploring the ways that the challenges of 2020 have forced us to rethink what the church can be and what it should be. We invite you to join us in person for our sanctuary service at 10 o'clock on Sunday mornings. If you're unable to attend in person, you can watch us online. Just go to our website, www.fpcgreensboro.org. That's fpcgreensboro.org. And there you can find links to our sanctuary service, as well as our Sunday bulletin, as well as other information about things going on here at the church. This Sunday, the Reverend Jill Duffield will be beginning a new series of sermons called Summer Blessings. This weekend, we're celebrating the July 4th holiday weekend. In July of 1776, the Continental Congress declared that the 13 American colonies were no longer subject to the will of the monarch of Britain, King George III, and that these colonies were now united, free, and independent states. The Congress had voted to declare independence on July 2nd, but there was some debate and some rewording of the actual Declaration of Independence, and it was finally approved on July 4th, 1776. Our hymn today is the patriotic hymn, America the Beautiful. It was written by Catherine Lee Bates. She was an English professor at Wellesley College in Massachusetts. In 1893, she took a train trip out to Colorado Springs, Colorado, in order to teach at a college there. And she was writing a poem. As she was looking out the window of the train along the way, she saw things that sort of found their way into her poem. The amber waves of grain, the wheat fields of canvas, the purple mountain majesty, Pikes Peak, and things like the white alabaster cities that were on display at the exhibition in Chicago. It was first published in July of 1895, in fact on July 4th, and it's considered to be by some America's unofficial national anthem in that it's a little bit easier to sing. As always, I'll put the words up on the screen for you and invite you to sing along with me, America the Beautiful.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed His grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for pilgrims' feet whose stern impassioned stress a thoroughfare for freedom beat across the wilderness. America, America, God mend thine every flaw. Confirm thy soul in self-control, thy liberty in law. Oh, beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. America, 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 may God thy gold refine, till all success be nobleness, and every gain divine. O beautiful for patriot dream that sees beyond the years, thine alabaster cities gleam, undimmed by human tears. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
One of the traditions of the Young Men's Bible class in the July 4th week is to sing some of the patriotic songs included in the hymnal. The group usually does rousing versions of America the Beautiful, My Country 'Tis of Thee, and the like. Most folks never give this practice a second thought. While July 4th is no doubt a secular celebration marking some of the key steps toward the founding of our country, it is also an opportunity many embrace to be grateful for the lives we have been able to live as Christians within its borders. The key part of that statement is as Christians. Continuing in our series on what the year 2020 taught us about our challenges as the 21st century church, we must recognize that in 2020 and early 2021, events revealed a dangerous spike in what we within the field of religious studies would call Christian nationalism. It was most notable in the storming of the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. I want to start by saying that Christian nationalism is distinct from being patriotic as a Christian citizen. Making that distinction between the two is essential, because failing to understand the difference is to fail to grasp the ways in which Christian nationalists co-opt the goodwill of many Christian citizens who want to celebrate the best of this country and support its traditions and officials. But these Christians do not have the same agenda as Christian nationalists. Let me offer us an entry point into the discussion by starting with some basic ideas. We all know that the ways in which we understand our varied identities gets complicated fast. We all have markers of who we are that we claim to different degrees at different times. We may, for example, sometimes emphasize the ties to our families. At others, it might be to our communities, to our schools, to our places of employment, to cities, to states, to nations, and yes, to churches. Even more, we are all too aware that both the nation and the church have strong pulls that are often seated in emotion. We also get that sometimes those pulls can cross in ways that end up correlating these two distinct spheres. Politicians, for instance, often evoke the name of God in the service of national interests, and they consistently talk about God's blessings on this nation. For example, I hear Franklin Delano Roosevelt in his fourth inaugural address in January 1945, when he says,
"The Almighty God has blessed our land in many ways. He has given our people stout hearts, strong arms, with which to strike mighty blows for freedom and truth. He has given to our country a faith which has become the hope of all people in an anguished world."
Or we might listen to the words of George W. Bush at the 1-year anniversary of September 11th, when he said,
"We cannot know all that lies ahead. Yet we do know that God has placed us together in this moment to grieve together, to stand together, to serve each other in our country. And the duty we have been given, defending America and our freedom, is also a privilege we share. We're prepared for this journey. And our prayer tonight is that God will see us through and keep us worthy."
These references make sense in the framework of a civil religion. That term rises out of the notion that not only did some of the early founders of our country have a strong religious orientation, but others were influenced by the philosophical ideals that were rooted in an intellectual tradition shaped specifically by Western Christianity and its concerns. And, of course, we recognize that religion has been an important characteristic of our national fabric. But saying that we have always been a Christian nation might be pushing the philosophical case more than history and the study of philosophy allows. We have tended instead as a country to be more broad and general in our religiosity, as opposed to theological. Take, for example, the familiar statement, "In God we trust." It's not exactly a theologically insightful idea about God or even about our country. Nor is the concept that divine providence impels our democratic political system to ideals like equity, fairness, justice, mercy, and cooperation. And even though they are not explicitly religious, many of our rituals still are built on the idea that there is a religious foundation. Just check out that family Bible on which Joe Biden's hand is placed during his oath of office. Still, these ideas stretch back to some of our earliest thinkers. Listen, for instance, to Benjamin Franklin in his autobiography when he writes, "I never was without some religious principles. I never doubted, for instance, the existence of the deity, that he made the world and governed it by his providence, that the most acceptable service of God was the doing of good to men, that our souls are immortal, and that all crime will be punished and virtue rewarded, either here or hereafter. These I esteemed the essentials of every religion." Thus, we shouldn't be too surprised, given that Christianity has been the dominant religious tradition in this country, that many folks see America and Christianity as related, going hand in hand. To many folks, America is the shining city on the hill, the phrase of the Puritan John Winthrop, a phrase that has been impressed more recently into service by multiple presidents and other politicians, who might see the way to get there quite differently, but who nonetheless share this assumption. Listen first to its use in a speech by then President-elect John F. Kennedy, followed by its incorporation into the farewell address of President Ronald Reagan.
"But I have been guided by the standard John Winthrop set before his shipmates on the flagship Arabella 331 years ago, as they too faced the task of building a new government on a perilous frontier. We must always consider," he said, "that we shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us. Today, the eyes of all people are truly upon us, and our governments in every branch, at every level, national, state, and local, must be as a city upon a hill, constructed and inhabited by men aware of their great trusts and their grave responsibilities."
The past few days, when I've been at that window upstairs, I've thought a bit of the shining city upon a hill. The phrase comes from John Winthrop, who wrote it to describe the America he imagined. What he imagined was important because he was an early pilgrim, an early freedom man. He journeyed here on what today we'd call a little wooden boat. And like the other pilgrims, he was looking for a home that would be free. I've spoken of the shining city all my political life, but I don't know if I ever quite communicated what I saw when I said it. But in my mind, it was a tall, proud city built on rocks stronger than oceans, windswept, God-blessed, and teeming with people of all kinds living in harmony and peace. A city with ports that hummed with commerce and creativity. And if there had to be city walls, the walls had doors, and the doors were open to anyone with the will and the heart to get here.
But we are also aware that religious ideals, like our democratic ones, are not always lived out in the ways that we might hope or dream. Indeed, in the appendix to his autobiography, Life of an American Slave, Frederick Douglass felt it necessary to clarify the words he had written about religion, lest he be seen as opposed to any religion. Thus he wrote, "What I have said respecting and against religion, I mean strictly to apply to the slave-holding religion of this land, and with no possible reference to Christianity proper. For between the Christianity of this land and the Christianity of Christ, I recognize the widest possible difference. I love the pure, peaceable, and impartial Christianity of Christ. I therefore hate the corrupt, slave-holding, woman-whipping, cradle-plundering, partial, and hypocritical Christianity of this land. Indeed, I can see no reason but the most deceitful one for calling the religion of this land Christianity. I look upon it as the climax of all misnomers, the boldest of all frauds, and the grossest of all libels." In this passage, Douglass is pointing out what we already know. Religion has been in the past, is in the present, and can be in the future, a beacon of beautiful and wonderful things. But it can also be a tool for those persons who want to lend support to specific cultural or political goals that do not advantage all people in the way that Christ taught. It can function that way because religion taps into our deepest and most profound beliefs and makes an emotive appeal that can mobilize people and shape behaviors in myriad ways that sometimes, even amongst believers or persons with respect for belief, are hotly debated and contested. What this means is that we recognize that we have a mixed history with regard to religion in this country. And that takes us to today. What is it that is happening with Christian nationalists, and why do we need to pay attention to it in the 21st century? A couple of definitions of Christian nationalism might help us get our heads around this question. On the most basic level, a statement against the uptick in Christian nationalism, signed by a number of different Christian leaders, says this: Christian nationalism seeks to merge Christian and American identities, distorting both the Christian faith and America's constitutional democracy. Now we can take that up a notch in terms of complexity by looking at what Dr. David W. Scott says. He puts it this way: Christian nationalism identifies the nation with God's will and action in the world, conflates national and Christian identity, and identifies service of the nation with service of God. Or we could go with Paul D. Miller. He argues that it's easiest to define Christian nationalism by contrasting it with Christianity. Christianity is a religion. It's a set of beliefs about ultimate things, most importantly about the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. It's drawn from the Bible, from the Nicene Creed, and the Apostles' Creed. Christian nationalism is a political ideology about American identity. It is a set of policy prescriptions for what the nationalists believe the American government should do. It's not drawn from the Bible. It draws political theory from secular philosophy and their own version of history as well. And then there is Andrew Whitehead and Samuel Perry, co-authors of the book Taking Back America for God, Christian Nationalism in the United States. They tell us that Christian nationalism is a cultural framework, a collection of myths, traditions, symbols, narratives, and value systems that idealizes and advocates a fusion of Christianity with American civic life. But the Christianity of Christian nationalism is of a particular sort. It includes assumptions of nativism, white supremacy, patriarchy, and heteronormativity, along with divine sanction for authoritarian control and militarism. What they're telling us is a certain kind of Christian culture becomes the end and the goal of a Christian nationalist. Further, these folks see their version of America as itself an expression of the ideals of Christ. And significantly, they will understand it to be not only okay, but also sometimes necessary to resort to violence to achieve such an end. There is, in other words, a kind of apocalyptic fervor to this nationalism and a militarism that is designed to both defend and expand what is seen as the good. Now, I should add, because I'm a scholar of religion and we scholars do like to cover our bases, that Christian nationalism is not unique to the United States. What we are seeing here and what we are seeing today is simply one particular guise of this kind of nationalism. But with that caveat done, let me also say that the distinction between our traditional kind of civil religion and Christian nationalism is a nuanced one. And we have to ask ourselves in the 21st century, with all of this going on around it, how we are going to navigate these waters. We could go to some classic biblical passages. Jesus in Mark 12, for instance, when he is being asked about paying taxes, or Romans 13, Paul's articulation to a community at that capital about their relationship to the apparatus of power. We could even go to the book of Revelation, which I did ponder today. Christian nationalists love reading the book of Revelation. But I want to go instead to a place you might not expect. I want to go to a conversation between Jesus and Pilate in the Gospel of John. Here is the scene. It is early on a Friday morning during the Passover, and Pilate, the procurator of Rome, is in the city of Jerusalem. By all accounts, he is a man who did not like being in Jerusalem and typically avoided it unless it was absolutely necessary. We know that he preferred his coastal enclave at Caesarea Maritima, some 75 miles away. But it was Passover, and it was Pilate's job to keep things calm during times when things could easily get dicey as Jews streamed into the city from all over the region. Jewish nationalism, including some militant and extremist branches, were a constant undercurrent around the temple in that time, and there was always the potential for some of the more violent groups to foment trouble during a festival that was all about freedom from oppression and slavery. On Pilate's doorstep this morning, however, were Jewish leaders, a group that Pilate probably was not all that crazy about. Indeed, we notice in the passage they wouldn't even enter the building where he was, lest they defile themselves for the Passover by walking inside. Even more, they had brought with them a man, and they wouldn't give Pilate a specific charge against him. Instead, when Pilate asked, they said, "If he were not doing evil, would we not have handed him over to you?" And they go a step further. They tell Pilate that they need him to do what they cannot, to execute him. It is, however, the conversation between Pilate and Jesus I find most interesting with regard to our subject for today. The text says that Pilate summons Jesus and speaks to him this line. Now, I've given you the traditional version with my version highlighted below. What is notable in the comparison is this. In the traditional version, Pilate is more of an interrogator, trying to get at something. Are you the king of the Jews? But my reading captures something different in tone, a kind of dismissive arrogance that the others miss. Think about what Pilate is seeing here. Here is this man who has been up all night long and taken from place to place in these sort of show trials. To Pilate's eyes, Jesus probably looks less like a threat and more like a tired, dirty, and disheveled human being. Thus, the tone I hear in the words attributed to Pilate is a bit sarcastic and a little incredulous. You are the king of the Jews? Without doubt, Jesus doesn't embody the traditional general human imagination of power that was then or is now. Pilate was more of that reality. He was a man with a title and with a Roman guard who would do his bidding. He was a man who could, and we know would in short order, sentence Jesus to death. But notice that Jesus doesn't back away from Pilate's question, answering, "Did you say this on your own, or did others say it to you about me?" It's certainly not much of a deferential tone, is it? Instead, Jesus comes straight back at Pilate, wanting to get some information in order to assess how best to respond to the question. Pilate shifts the ground quickly, honing in on what concerns him. Listen, I'm not a Jew, am I? Your own people, the word here is ethnos, and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done? Pilate's letting Jesus know that so far as he sees it, this is nothing more than a Jewish thing. And he's a little bit curious at best as to what Jesus did to tick off the Jewish leadership so early in this morning. Now here comes the important part for today. Jesus answers, "My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Jesus says to Pilate that what it is that the Jews feared, indeed, what it is that would upset Pilate and cause him to have to do something, is not what is happening here. He is not leading an insurrection. He is not fomenting an uprising. He is not establishing an earthly base of authority. He is telling Pilate that he does have a kingdom, but he is clear that that kingdom is not here. It is a point we cannot miss about who we are as followers of Christ. God's kingdom is not America or Germany or Israel or China or any other nation or people. It is not here in the sense that it is not about the power and the politics of any one place, any one time. Indeed, we remember that Jesus does not take on some earthly throne. Rather, his power is revealed on the very cross where Pilate sentences him to die. Now, this reality does not mean that we as Christians have to be hands off on the issues of this world, because Jesus also taught us that the kingdom of God was present and being realized in this realm, and that realization sometimes touches issues that are hot button. Feeding the hungry, housing the homeless, curing the sick, embracing the stranger, visiting the imprisoned, caring for the creation, challenging the powers that be, and the like. We could keep going on. Thus, when we're here trying to figure it out on July 4th, what do we say? I would start with appreciating the fact that we live in a country that celebrates religious freedom, and not simply for Christians, but for people of all faiths. We also recognize in our celebrations that our call as Christians is not to equate America or any other political entity with the kingdom of God, but to see that kingdom as Jesus did, as a present reality for all people in and through the way that we live and the work that we do, regardless of who happens to be in political power. But on July 4th of this particular year, we also have to think about ourselves in the 21st century in America, and we have to take a hard look at what is happening in our country. Because even though Christian nationalism may not be a feature of our common congregational life, it is still at a crisis level in many communities. And I haven't even mentioned things like QAnon, and trust me, we could spend hours there. So I want to leave us with this idea. Christian nationalism at its core is not simply against the premises of Christianity. It is against the premises of this country as well. To help you think about that idea, I want to turn to Barry Goldwater, 5-term Arizona senator and one-time presidential candidate. In 1981, Senator Goldwater took to the floor of the Senate and gave an intriguing and prescient speech called To Be Conservative. In that speech, he called attention to the rising problem of religious influencers seeking to use religion to shape politics. He derided the culture wars of his era and the time that those battles took away from the business of governing. And he spoke with passion about the unwillingness of such folks to compromise or to respect that moral people could see an issue differently. But perhaps most significantly, he saw the damage that such groups could wreak. He said, "The uncompromising position of these groups is a divisive element that could tear apart the very spirit of our representative system if they gain sufficient strength." Here, Goldwater agreed with Benjamin Franklin. You see, when I told you earlier about Franklin's quote, I didn't quite finish it, because after he said that he esteemed the essentials of every religion, he went on to conclude, "And being to be found in all religions we had in our country, I respected them all, though with different degrees of respect, as I found them more or less mixed with other articles, which without any tendency to inspire, promote, or confirm morality, served principally to divide us and to make us unfriendly to one another." Thus today, as we celebrate our country and all that it has offered to us, let us also consider and begin to sort out what it means to be the people of God, what it means to act for the purposes of God, and what it means to be doing that work in an American context, and to think carefully about how we, as a Christian community, can support the best of what we are as a country while not confusing or conflating that appreciation with our fidelity to God. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to speaking to you again next week.